Welcome to the Galen Trombley Show. Be sure to subscribe, review, and share the episode. You can follow me on social media at Galen Trombley. I hope you enjoy the show.
Greetings. Please hold for a very important message. Light speed sequence initiated.
How may I help you?
Bonjour.
Security breach.
The truth shall set you free. Awesome. It's a miracle.
Stabilizing. 3, 2, 1. Mission complete.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Welcome, everybody. Episode 266 of the Galen Trombley Show. My guest today, recently back in the area. He's got a nice Florida tan right now, but Chris Waterbury is back in town. We'll dive into a whole bunch of things, but just, I guess, kind of the overarching thing, or how you may know of Chris, is almost 40 years of coaching at Plattsburgh State, men's soccer, and recently took a new position, which we'll talk about. And then his spare time, we'll get into all that, but I think you're still very active, right?
Yes.
Never
yes.
stop moving?
Yeah.
So Chris, for people that don't know you, give us a little, where'd you come from? How'd you get to, how we know you at Plattsburgh State?
Sure. Well, thanks for having us. But I appreciate it,
Yeah.
But, I ended up, ironically or so, I was a physical education major at Cortland State, and afterwards getting a master's at the University of Albany, and got a grad assistant program as an assistant coach there. I had all intentions of being a PE teacher in a school. And one thing led to another. A job opened up at New England College, half-time pay, full-time men's soccer coach, full-time teacher within their PE program, and the director of intramurals. And the caveat in that, it was guaranteed to not be rehired at the end of the year. And yeah, so it was but I looked at it like, wow, I can be a teacher in a university. I can be a soccer coach, which I had a passion for. And so I went for it. At the end of that year, I was job searching. A job came up at Linden State College. I was 50% admissions counselor, 50% soccer coach. After 2 years, the job opened up at Plattsburgh, and I was still pretty young. I got the job at Plattsburgh, and that first year was 85, and never looked back.
What? How old were you on your first year at Plattsburgh State?
I was 25.
25.
And actually, it's funny you say that, because there were 3 guys on the team that year that were older than I was. And
I was wondering, I said, how close in age were these kids? So
yeah.
So how was that, coaching older kids?
It was fine. As odd as it sounds, because I was so fortunate to be able to just get a head coaching job immediately. I had already had 3 years of head coaching experience, and self-awareness and looking back on things. I just roll my eyes at all the mistakes you make when you're young, and I'd love to go back and coach those first few teams and do it again, and in my mind, get it right,
So, and that was actually one of my questions I was probably going to ask you closer to the end, but since we dove into it, looking back now, if you took the mind that you have now, the experience you have now, and how would you change it back in the 80s starting off?
Well, I think, boy, there's just no substitution for experience. The part of the problem is you don't really gain those insights unless you make mistakes. One of the things that I learned, if you have a 4-0 win, sometimes you don't learn anything about yourself and your team. When you have setbacks, if you can try to figure out, all right, here's where we went wrong, here's what we can work on. But I think that's a big part of it is making mistakes and hopefully learning not to make them again. And so I think, looking back on, your specific question, I guess when I first got into coaching, I had this philosophical thought process of this is the way we're going to play. And, it's, if I can use an analogy in any other sport, if you're big and huge in basketball, but you're really slow, you don't want to be a run and gun offense. You want to be a half court offense and utilize your height and your strength. Same thing goes in soccer. If, I had this idea of a way to play, but we didn't have the players that fit that style. And I think one of the things I learned over the years was identify all the strengths and weaknesses of your players. Try to recruit players based upon the style that you'd like to play. But getting back to that, if you can identify what are all the strengths of your players and come up with a system that accentuates what those strengths are as compared to exposes what those weaknesses are. And if your team is extremely slow, you don't want to get stretched as a team. If your team is fast, now you can be up and down.
So going back, you're 25. Do you think that the inability to play a different style was lack of experience, meaning I just don't understand another style to play, or was it just hard-headedness of like, we're going to get this down and they're going to kind of conform to how I want to play?
Yeah, maybe a little of both. Probably. It's one of the things that I would strongly recommend to any young coach is I did a lot of coaching education. And by that meaning, went to seminars, went to coaching diploma courses, things like that. And a lot of your best ideas and the best things you do as a coach are honestly plagiarized. You've seen somebody else do it, and you like certain aspects of it or all of it, and you tweak it to your own liking, and you make it work for you within your team. And so I think a lot of it was just my growth as a person and a coach, but I think a lot of it was, as dumb as it sounds, you can't put a system in place, and I'm just using it because obviously they're a hot team. Like I know what Barcelona does as a soccer team. Mm-hmm. But their system may not be what's best for the team that I'm coaching, because I heard a coach say this, and I know a lot of people have heard this expression. Sometimes the best method is the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid.
Yep.
And the stupid is for me, the coach. I think that was one of the things that I helped me as a coach was I started trying to figure out what's the best system for us and do it to the best of our abilities as compared to what's the system that was the hot system in the world at that time, if that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. So when you were, and did you keep the education up throughout the 40 years?
Yeah.
You were
I tried
to reinvent a little bit.
Yeah. And again, I would do these different coaching diplomas. And then what helped me out a lot was then I got certified to teach some of the diploma courses. Mm-hmm. So now there's a constant, you've got to keep up with different things going on in order to be that presenter in different situations. And so I think regardless of whether you're talking soccer coaching or anything else, most things, constantly change and evolve. The game certainly does. Mm-hmm. The styles, the tactics. And so it's important to be able to just keep up with that and just maintain your own education.
When you were teaching, so I've done stuff where you have to explain it to people, and I've heard this over and over again from different mentors, for me more in the business field, but they said, if you teach something, you learn it even better. Yeah. Because you kind of go more, you kind of simplify it, but you can now express it. Did you find that was true for you? Absolutely.
In fact, it's funny you say that because a lot of the coaching courses you took, the clinicians would be out there and they would be teaching, let's say, a certain some drills and maybe a specific topic, mm-hmm. and show here's some drills how to get that topic accomplished, and and he would ask, he or she, whoever the clinician would ask for volunteers, and I would always run out there, because if you're one of the the people that he's coaching, I found that I learned it better. Yeah. Rather than sitting on the sideline and just watching.
Well, actually, when I was in school and I went to Plattsburgh State, but I would sit in the front, because to me I learned better. And I think that's, like I said, I just like limit the distractions and just really be immersed in whoever's teaching. So that's still a constant. If I go to seminars or I go to things, I try to sit as close as possible. It's just because I don't people watch as much. I'm like really focused on the presenter. But again, if you're in it, it's even better.
Yeah, you're gonna laugh at me, but I had a team rule. That our team rule was that every player, you had to sit in the front of the classroom in the first row.
Okay.
And I said, I'm going to check up on you once in a while. And if you're not in the front row and you said all the seats were taken, then I'm going to tell you didn't get there soon enough, and you must have been late. And so, but there's a lot to be said to it. It's it's hard to fall asleep in the front row.
I actually had one class. I sat 2 rows back, and this was back when, kind of before cell phones. So I'd bring like Sports Illustrated in. I'd grab a magazine or whatever, and I would just sit direct. So the teacher never moved. She sat at a desk. So I sat behind the kid that sat in front of her, and it was like a gen ed. I didn't really care. So I would just read the magazine every day, but she couldn't see me because I always sat behind somebody. So it was a little different. I didn't fall asleep, but I was pretty much using that. All the good major classes, though, I always wanted to be a little more up front. When you go back to, let's say, mentors or people you learned from, was there anybody that you really gravitated towards, professional coaches, college coaches, peers, where it was like, that you just really found that their tactics kind of rubbed off on you the correct way, or you got a lot out of them? Is there any that you went back to over and over?
I was very, very fortunate to have a number of colleagues that I got to know, and people that, simply put, were either colleagues or could have been our rivals. Mm-hmm. And I was fortunate that I got to be pretty good friends with a lot of different people. And a lot of times, you call them up and you just talk about things. And I used to do a lot of things like, it's a funny way to think of it, but I would have a couple of friends of mine who we played against. And once we played against them, we would do this little exercise where I'd call them up and I'd say, all right, given what you saw yesterday when we played, mm-hmm. All right, if you played us again tomorrow, how would you beat us? And then I would do the same thing to him. Mm. And so what we would basically do is I would now, if you and I were talking, I'd tell you, hey, listen, you know what I noticed yesterday? You guys were really susceptible to the counter on this, and this. If I had to do it all over again, what we'd do is we'd sit back, sucker you in, let you get a little deeper into us, and then we'd think to play quicker, getting out of instead of building slowly. If those are goofy examples, but what we would do is we'd basically listen to other people as how they saw us. Sometimes it's a good example would be is if you proofread your own paper, you still might make mistakes or go over things. Usually the best way is to get somebody else to proofread your paper. Yeah. And they seem to read it slowly and catch the misspellings or the grammar mistakes. And so it's the same thing with like it sounds like such a simple thing, but we would actually talk about and then he, that person would tell me some things that he perceived as weaknesses, and that gave me an insight on, all right, how are we going to make sure this doesn't happen?
Was that reciprocated pretty well?
Yeah,
or coaches were open to it?
Yeah, of course, and obviously, if there was the chance that we were going to see them in the playoffs, mm-hmm. then maybe we were, let's do it after the season, that kind of thing. So, but I guess what I'm getting at is, it was sometimes it's very difficult to look at a game right afterwards. And, if the fact that you won doesn't mean you have to be ecstatic and that you played well. The fact that you lost doesn't mean that the world's, crumbling in front of you. You have to sort of analyze, what did we do? What did we do wrong? And how do we fix it? And, and the problem with soccer specifically is, again, just to use the basketball example, if you have fewer turnovers, higher shooting percentage, more trips to the line, more defensive and offensive rebounds, there's a good chance you won the game. Okay? In soccer, you can outshoot people. You can have fewer fouls. There's only one stat that matters, and that's goals. And so you can, have more possession time, and everything, you've done everything well, and yet still not win the game. And so trying to figure out what are we doing wrong as compared to, did we do things right? And, at what point did we break down, and trying to learn from those things.
What, like you kind of mentioned before, like the idea of KISS, like what were some basics that you would always go, again, in like my life, there's things I do, and then I find that I'm getting too, what's the term? Like you can't see the forest through the trees. Like you get too ingrained and too deep, and then all of a sudden you're like, what am I? I'm like I'm almost like too much in my own way. Like, let me just go back and like, let me keep, what's the main metrics, or you could say goals, but like, what's the main things that you pay attention to? So if you felt you needed a reset, what were the basics that you would come back to each year, each season, maybe even each practice, that would be like, okay, let's focus on this. Let's not get too crazy.
Yeah. And again, there's the challenge is if your team needs specific work, okay, and you practice that every day, that doesn't. There's several things that you're trying to get out of it. The first is, and again, you could be a basketball coach, have the greatest offense. It's a great offense. But if your players can't dribble, they can't catch, they can't shoot, they don't know when to move off the ball, things like that, you're going to struggle. So the idea is there's no tactics without technique. And so so the skills have to be there in order to develop, more intricate tactics. With that said, the challenge is, to develop good skill, you need a lot of repetition. Okay. It's the same thing in tennis. You need over and over repetition, building up, muscle memory and everything else. The fundamental issue, the challenge is making it so that it's fresh in the players' minds. It's fresh in that it's, and so if you can come up with a specific activity that challenges that skill and constantly make it fresh and different so that each day it's something new, but it's still challenging that's the challenge in the sense of, and that is something that helped me with 30 plus years in coaching, is you develop this repertoire of a million different drills in your mind, and you can tweak things to be ever so slightly different. And then, you start out with the basics, and now you make it into more of a game situation. Then you do lots of different things. And I think one of the things that I tried to do to develop that kind of mentality, no matter what we were doing, whether it be just a simple passing activity, everything was, we were keeping score, and everything was a game. And in every single, and it might be as simple as, we're going to do this possession activity, this team versus this team, or for example, losers picking up balls, pennies, and cones afterwards, and just the but even though that's not the most terrible penalty in the world, but what it did is you're trying to just train competitive spirit, and figuring out a way in every little activity we're doing, you're going to try to win.
Because what was the season typically at college? Like, when did you start? When did you finish? I know there was spring ball. Like, what was what was the seasonal aspect?
Well, ironically, as bizarre as it sounds, a college soccer player, in terms of their college soccer, at that point in their life is they're actually playing the least amount of soccer they've ever played, which makes no sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Because this is the highest level that you've gotten to. So what I'm getting at is a high school student is playing in the fall generally, okay, depending on the state, but most of them are playing in the fall. And they had a summer team they played on. In the spring, they had a club team. They probably played some indoor, depending on the weather, things like that. And give or take, they're playing all year round, okay, reasonably. Even if they play another sport, they can still touch on that sport. But with that said, your college soccer season starts about, and there's a formula in place, and it's when is your first scheduled game, okay? And you can't schedule a game before September 1, okay? That's the latest. With that said, now all of a sudden you're allowed a certain amount of practices backward, of which if you're in classes, you can practice once a day. Okay? If you're not in classes, you can practice 2 times a day. All right. So you're allowed at the time. I can't tell you that it's still the same rule, but it was 16 practices before your first contest. So it's generally speaking.
And would that count the 2-a-days?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the 2-a-days counted as 2.
Yep.
And then those 1-a-days obviously counted as 1. And you had 16 practices leading up to your first contest. All right. So generally you come back in the 3rd week, 23rd, 24th of August, a week of preseason, and then a week of classes, and then your first contest. If you're lucky, you're still playing in November. And if you're incredibly lucky, you're finishing up in the first week in December. Okay, 95% of all the teams are done before November 1st, or around there.
Yeah.
And so, but if you think about it, it's only 2.5 months, and then you have a spring season, which was, and it just recently changed, and I believe I know what it is now, but it was 15 practices in over a 5-week span. So basically three a week. And so we tried to emphasize so much on and here's the big problem is all the incoming freshmen. We didn't worry about them and their fitness and their touch and everything else because they're coming off all those, they're coming off their club season, their summer season, everything else. Once a college player gets to be 19, 20, 21, all of a sudden he's very limited in what he can do in the off season. So we tried to do so much with training them to learn how to train themselves. And I don't mean to, this isn't a knock on our present day athletes at all, but because they have so many opportunities to play, they really don't play as much in the pickup, behind the schoolyard.
Yeah.
Because they don't have to. All right. Because they can play in their team 4 or 5 days a week, whatever level that is. And so the fundamental thing that we worked with was all the players, how to test themselves physically. We tried to work with them. Just think about this. If our season ended November 1st and our spring season started March 20th, you've got basically
4 months.
almost
5.
Well, 3 or 4 months minimum where the players have no opportunity to hone their skills. So that was a significant problem for us to help educate our players. And most of those players were used to just going from game to practice to game to practice in their club teams and everything else.
Was there any limitation you put on the players in the off season?
Oh, no.
Like don't play indoor, don't play.
No.
Okay, so they could.
We highly encouraged them.
Okay.
Yeah. And as this is a really odd thing to grasp, or just put your head around it, is we would find that at the end of a freshman player's first season, okay, to the start of the spring season, which was, as you said, almost 4 months later, we found they took a major step backward, because for the first time in their lives, they went 2, 3, 4 months without opportunities to play. And when they, for example, when they went home, wherever their home was, they might play in a Christmas indoor tournament with a group of guys and things like that. But that it's, and there's nothing wrong with this. It's 10 guys got together, formed a team, paid the entrance fee, played the tournament, and it becomes a weekend warrior kind of thing.
How were the kids, like, if you're a 18, 19 years old kid and you play, and let's say, you play the season, you get done, you have four months off, just from like a recovery, diet, nutrition. I mean, you have kids that come in, and I don't know how big a role this plays or how much you guys dove into this, but if you have a kid that comes in and has just bad eating habits because they could, they basically could fit whatever they could eat, they would just burn off as a kid.
Yep.
And as you get older and it's like, hey, we don't have those 4 months. Did you find, especially kids away at college, they don't have parents, they don't have kind of maybe as much of a thumb on them as they did at home, or people that are more independent. Did you find that was ever an issue too, where players would get done the season, maybe gain some weight, or maybe just, like you said, kind of just not show up fit enough?
Yeah.
Beyond just lack of playing? Yeah,
absolutely. Like we would have end of the season meetings with all the players, one-on-one. And we would tell them, exactly what you just said. This is the trap. This is the pitfall. And as terrible as this sounds, there's somebody, one of your teammates or somebody is going to fall into this trap. Mm-hmm. All right. And we would tell them here are the pitfalls. Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but apparently kids like to have fun at college.
I've heard.
And apparently, that fun can be infectious. All right, if that's a good way to. It's a very diplomatic way to put that.
Yeah.
So you're not telling the kids don't have fun. Mm-hmm. You're telling them, you have an obligation to yourself, your team, who you represent, and everything else, and you can have fun along the way. Absolutely. But here are the dangers. Here are the pitfalls. Here's what we've seen over 20 years. This is what happens. Somebody's going to be a lesser player than they were coming in, and it's just amazing that will happen. And, the average college student puts on a little weight. What do they call it? The freshman
15?
Freshman 15, whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
But that's really going to affect an athlete. Mm-hmm. And so, you try to help them, you try to talk to them. And the other thing that we tried to do a lot is as simple, like I would have meetings with 4 or 5 or 6 guys that I was 100% convinced were everything we wanted out of a student athlete, mm-hmm. in terms of their attitude, their commitment, being, the term being a great teammate, mm-hmm. and what does that actually mean? And I would talk to them, 5 or 6 or 7 guys. Hey, how's Timmy doing? I'm a little worried about him. Is he doing all right in school? And these guys would look after him and make sure that he was doing the right thing, and that if they were in a class together, make sure that they were both there, in mind and body, and so and you're trying to, like I've always believed that, your 2 best leaders don't have to be your elected captains. Mm-hmm. A good leader has nothing to do with being a captain. It's a captain can be a great leader, of course, but we wanted to have many, many good leaders. And, you've always thought we've all heard the expression, one bad egg spoils the bunch a little bit, but it certainly works the other way too.
Yeah.
Good eggs make everybody better.
So you always carry two captains?
It varied.
Oh, it did. Okay.
We did a lot of different things. We went from one captain to two captains. I remember one year we had three, and one year what we did, and this was an interesting thing. We had two captains, but we had, and if you're aware, the armband that the captains wear, so that the referee knows who the captains are. So it's a small armband that goes over their jersey, and what we would do is based upon the week in practice, and this could be a starter, could be the backup goalie, it could be anybody on the team. Whoever I thought had a great week, he was our third captain for that game. And so it had nothing to do with playing time. It had nothing to do, it was all about, it was representing us in a good way. And it could have been something like how hard they worked, how some of the leadership things they did. It could have been, we had a guy who organized this fantastic community service project with kids in a hospital. And I was like, and he did it on his own. And, I wanted to take credit for that, but it was all him. Mm-hmm. And, and that was, for me, you couldn't think of a better way to reward somebody, so but we've done it differently depending on the years. A captain is always a very, very, a great captain is worth their weight in gold. Mm-hmm. And a bad captain is catastrophic to the team. Mm-hmm. And especially, some people would ask me, do you ever have underclassmen as a captain? And I have, because, for example, let's say you have a senior and a junior. Now, when that senior is gone, you have somebody sort of that carries the torch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
But with that said, what if you pick a junior and they're a catastrophe? And now that junior expects to be captain next year. And now if you don't have him as a captain next year, now how's he going to react to that? And is he going to drag somebody down? Is there going to be a rift between you and the player? Mm-hmm. I'm not saying there's a right and wrong way to do it, because I think every situation and every team and every coach and player is different. But you do have to think about those things.
Did you pick the captains, or was it?
I did it a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
A good friend of mine who was a basketball coach, he would say, if anybody wants to be a captain, be prepared to tell the team why. And what he would do was make them stand up and say, this is why I'd like to be your captain. And he felt that if they didn't have the guts to talk to his teammates like that, then he couldn't be their captain. Now, I never did anything like that, but what I would do is I did everything from a team vote to nominations to only I'm picking the captains, that kind of thing. I did have the benefit of, so for example, what we were talking about with the schedule, after the fall season, when we had that spring season, I was able to see who were the people that were leaders stepping up for our off-season weight program, who were the people that were going to be leaders in that spring season. And then we either appointed captains there for the summer mm-hmm. or waited till the fall. I had the flexibility to do many different things. The one thing I discovered that was very interesting is a couple times I would do a team vote, okay? And what I would do is you would vote for first place, second place, third place, okay? And, and in the order of preference.
Yep.
Okay? And what I started finding is 3/4 of the team would clearly vote for 1 and 2, almost either 1 and 2 or 2 and 1, that kind of thing. And occasionally there'd be somebody else scattered in there. But the vast, vast majority of the votes would be pretty consistent. And then you'd get a scattering, so the third place vote getter, if I'm generically making this up, first place got, let's say if 25 people voted and everybody votes for 3 people, first place got 18 votes, second place got 17 votes, and the third place got 5 votes. Okay, but what I mean by that, but there was like 8 people got 5 votes.
Yep.
And so what you found is you potentially could have your third captain only get a quarter of the total votes. And so what if and then the other thing that I started finding is every once in a while you get that person that, for example, I'm not going to vote for you because that's 1 vote more you have than me because I want to be captain.
Because they know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I made people do is you have to sign, I would give them a card. They got to sign their name on the front. So they have to own their work. And so when I looked at it, if somebody put the bottom 3 players on the team, I knew what he was doing. I knew he was trying to not give any votes to his quote unquote competition. And I didn't like that at all, to say the least. So
how many years did it take to catch that? Is that pretty early on that you found that out?
I found that out pretty quick.
Yeah.
So, but it's those are the outliers. The kids, for the most part, they're good kids. They do the right thing, and they want the right people in the place.
So how would you describe your first off, how would you describe your leadership style, and did it change, or if it did change, how did it change over the years?
I think, and that's where that question you had asked me right at the beginning is, what would I do differently? Is I think what I would have probably realized is there's nothing wrong with realizing, self-awareness is an important trait, and sometimes you need to realize you don't know everything, and that's okay. It's actually better to know you don't know something than to think you do. And so I think over the years, I think my coaching style was sort of like almost like a benevolent dictator. And what I mean by that is more of a parental type of thing where, and this is going to sound strong, but I love every one of the players, but I do believe I know what's best for the vast majority of them. And so I would treat them almost like my own children. And sometimes you have to be a little strict with them, and sometimes you can let them go a little bit. And I always thought that was important. But the one thing where I became a little more of a, I guess you could say, I would solicit opinions all the time. And I would guess I got a little more democratic in my coaching, in the sense of I would talk to the players. I'd say, listen, we've got a huge game coming up on Monday, all right, which is an odd day for a game. I know we've got a game on Friday, and we've got Saturday off, and I think we need to just touch the ball a little on Sunday before our game Monday. But to practice on a Sunday is a bit on the unusual side. And I would bring our leadership group in, maybe the captains and 4 or 5 other upperclassmen. I'd say, what do you guys think? And I say, the other thing is, look, if we play on Friday and we have a good result, and I would always laugh and say, man, if I were you guys, I think I'd want to go out after that. I'd be pumped. But we gotta recover on Saturday. We gotta practice on Sunday, and Monday's ramifications for postseason. And I would talk to the team, and if I could, or the leadership group, if I could get them to buy in on this is why it's important to, maybe be a little more docile on Friday night, and if they bought into it, then the rest of the team would. And so, but I wanted to talk them as equals and say, listen, this is what I think. What do you guys think?
I wasn't going to say to get some buy-in from the players, but then because I think the more opinions they have, the more it becomes their team too.
Sure.
It's not just kind of like we play for coach or we play. You do end up being this kind of puppet that just gets kind of dragged along through the season. It's like they have more buy-in, they have more ownership of the season, the results. Did you ever have dry seasons?
I never did.
Okay.
Although I do know a lot of coaches that did that. And I thought that was very, very much a double-edged sword. Okay, and what I mean by that is I felt much better about, and I'll give you a good example, and you might think less of me, or you might love it. All right, we had just won. Again, we were tied for first place in the conference. All right, and we had beaten the second and the fourth team on a Friday and a Saturday. All right,
Okay.
two games in.
This is SUNYAC.
This is SUNYAC.
Okay.
All right, and because of the way the format was, we were going to have a 10-day break before our next game.
Okay.
And we were now the number one seed. Okay. And I brought the guys into the locker room, and everybody is just pumped.
Yeah.
All right. They got the music going and everything. And so we turn everything off and we talk about a couple housekeeping details. And then I said, and I put up on the chalkboard, I wrote 10 p.m. And I said, sorry, boys, we got a 10 p.m. curfew. And everybody's jaw just dropped. And I said, and none of you better be in your rooms at 10 p.m.
Be in your room.
Yeah. In other words, I gave them the green light.
Yeah.
And I said, you had a great weekend. You deserve it. I'll see you Monday. And I never said it, they figured out what I was saying. And, but it's, I think, the problem with the dry season is I think if you can pick and choose your times, I think it works as long as you can trust your players and you have a great rapport with them. With that said, all right, what are, if you decide to have a dry season, all right, what are the penalties? Because as well as I do, somebody's going to break that rule.
Yeah, someone's going to crack. Yeah.
Yeah. And see, the other thing that I sort of liked is I like developing a team that if you found one, you found 18 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about it, if you've got, these teams that have an issue with something like hazing, okay, what are the odds that there's hazing going on in your team and your captains and your upperclassmen don't know anything about it? Virtually nil, because they're the ones doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the education, right from the very beginning before the season starts, this is why we do this. You're not the hazer. You're that person's big brother. This is not who we're going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to. So I almost use the same example of, like if something's going to go on, I'd rather them all be there so they're big brothers for each other. And so it's always been a delicate thing, how to allow the students to grow. It's like what you were saying about me as a coach is sometimes you have to make a mistake to learn from it, and not that you want those kind of mistakes, but it's there's an awful lot of people that, easily could argue with this point of view for sure. But, it's, hopefully, these people, young men and women, become good people and, go on and represent you really well.
Yeah, I always, I think if I had to pick, I would never do a dry season just for the fact that I don't like elimination of stuff, because I feel then it becomes this taboo thing that the kids end up, it's like I tell my kid not to go in the puddle as I walk out to the car. They're going to go in the puddle.
Absolutely.
And I think it's the same, and I think if you can trust them and let them make the decision, and I also go back to, it's like, how bad do you want to play soccer?
Sure.
And it's not a beneficial thing, then you're at that point you're treating them as an adult, and I feel like it allows them to make the correct decision, as I'm sure many of the guys are like, hey, I'd rather wake up clear-headed tomorrow and go to practice and not feel sick or whatever.
Well, the other thing along those lines is, sometimes you can, as a coach, you can create your own problems. And what I mean by that is if you decide to have a Saturday 8 a.m. practice for a college team, there could be the chance somebody might oversleep for one reason or another. Now you got a discipline situation. So I don't want to say I'm skirting the issue, but let the kids have, let them get up, have, the other problem with an 8 a.m. practice, the college students, how many of them are going to have breakfast first?
No, probably none. They're rolling out of bed and running.
They're all running. They're getting there right at the right time, barely running down there. And so, is that good training? And in a perfect world, they'd say they all got up at 6:30. They got a good breakfast, digest. Even if they got a breakfast, they got it 8 minutes before we start practice.
Yeah.
And, that's not the right thing. That's not, ideal for good training habits. So I would much rather, have that practice, at 11, 12, 1, 2 o'clock, that kind of thing in the afternoon. Because one, I think it'd be better for the players, and I think it's probably better for the team.
Could have more energy too.
Yeah.
Actually get a little bit more out of them. So Chris, you kind of alluded to this before, but when you look at and I never played college soccer. I played high school, but I played against, or I had some, teammates that played in college. And the one thing I remember vividly as a kid is those pickup games behind the schools. You throw some shoes down at a party, barbecue or whatever. And I felt we just always were playing some type of soccer in some capacity, and that you didn't need, 2-3 guy or 2v2 to 3v3 was perfect, and I found that the couple things. One, you had the athleticism, so you were able to run around more. But to me, at least in our sake, we built up a very good. I'm trying to think, like, cohesiveness of the team, or
Sure.
You know what I mean. We understand.
Yeah.
What's what I'm thinking of here? You knew where every player was going to be. You knew their tendencies. You had this, you know what I'm trying to say. But you had this bond with these guys, and then the other side of it is you had a lot of creativity. You learned how to move without the ball. You learned how to do, hold guys off, defend, different angles, and little things that you probably can't replicate in a game or in a practice, but that come up because it's just free flowing and it's just reactionary. It's not as much like rigid, like make this pass, do this. So you really just kind of had this creative freedom to play. And now, granted, there's nothing on the line, bragging rights, among some friends. But, you're playing against guys that were competitive and didn't want to lose. And I found that really allowed us to, or chemistry, that's what I'm thinking of. So allowed us to take that chemistry that we had and all just the little nuances and bring it to a field where, we found success. And I think a lot of it was those off-time practices. And, we had great coaches and structure and everything. But I think just the ability to play with these guys, like you said, almost 12 months out of the year, a lot of structure, but a lot of unstructuredness. And then so I want you to kind of speak to that. And then my second thing, piggybacking off of that, is what's your view on someone that plays multi-sports versus a specialist? Because I think in high school you're starting to see less multi-sports.
Yep.
When I went to school, you played 3 sports.
Yep.
That was just the thing because we didn't have all the options. And then when I started to graduate, you started to see the intro of the travel teams and the club teams and the indoor teams. And now that is just as important to kids as the school season is. So I guess speaking on those two about kind of like the more rec style back in the day, which was probably we had less structure. So we made our own thing. And then multi-sport versus a specialist.
Yeah. Well,
or any opinions on those?
Well, yeah, both actually, quite a bit. The first thing you're talking about the rec pickup kind of thing, that is so valuable for several reasons. The kids are doing it for the love of whatever game that is. You're playing 2-on-2 hoop or 3-on-3 soccer or whatever. But the other thing is, picture this. It's 11v11 soccer. If you're scrimmaging and you scrimmage for an hour, that individual player, best case scenario, is one-on-one defending for 2 minutes and one-on-one attacking for 2 minutes. All right, that's about all that. Like, you're not going to actually have the ball. So the beauty of the 2-on-2, 3-on-3, one-on-one stuff, you're always defending and you're always attacking. And so you've got to learn how to position your body and the ball. The spaces are tighter, so you have to think faster. All of those type of things are so incredibly important. And, I've always felt that kind of thing is so important for any student's development, if that's a good way to put it. And then getting to, the other part of that with the multi-sports, I'm a huge advocate of playing multiple sports. I tell you, I always noticed, my daughter played in college, but she, soccer in college, but she also played high school hockey. And I think playing high school hockey made her a better soccer player, because the hockey's a faster sport in terms of seeing things. Things happen faster, and you've got to position your body and know how to shield the puck and everything else that goes along with it, and see things quicker and faster. And and all of those things will help you develop in other sports. So I'm a huge believer in it. I really think it's a good thing. The other thing too is, personally, I always found in my own kids that when one season ended, and and let's face it, unless you win a state title, you're probably ended on disappointment. And not to necessarily say disappointment, but the season's
a loss, though.
Yeah. And now all of a sudden, your mind is so fresh for whatever that new sport is that you're playing. And sometimes the kids need to take a little time off for themselves and just be a kid. And but I think the freshness that I've always seen out of kids when one sport ends and the next one starts, I really liked it a lot. And there's awful lot of science out there that talks about better development in your body in terms of multi-sport playing as compared to specifics in one sport. There can be overuse injuries, things like that, and so the science out there tells you multiple sports.
Well, I think burnout too. Like if you have a kid that just plays all the time and they're playing one sport, and I guess two factors. I've seen that with kids where they just burn out because they play the same sport over and over again, and they don't want to play another practice or minute of that sport that they initially love because they just put so much time into it. And some kids get away with that. I mean, there's players that they love the sport, and that is literally they'll ride that train. But I felt like, again, I played multi sports, but like you said, the changing of the seasons or the sports was always like a nice, like, kind of refresh, and just different muscles, different stimuli. It changed it up a bit. And I've seen other players, like I know some players that have played at a pretty high level. They're talking college, it could be D1 college, and all they played was, say, soccer, or all they played was baseball or whatever, basketball. And then when you ask them, like, say, a soccer player, and let's say you played D1 soccer and you played basically soccer your whole career, and say, okay, go throw me something. and they're like, they don't have the body awareness, or like in your case,
Yeah.
do a tennis serve, like,
Yeah.
and then you take someone that played, basketball or softball or baseball and soccer and whatever else they might. If you give them a paddle, you give them a racket, you give them a stick, you give them a bat, like they can probably adapt to it fairly quick versus because they have so many different body mechanics. Like you said, your daughter, skating is very different than running and soccer, but
Yeah.
she's basically evolved her physicalness in, to adapt to a different kind of range of motion. So, I mean, I always feel like that's the better thing. But again, sports change, and I realize that some kids feel they're falling behind if they're not playing all the time.
And they're also in defense of these kids. They're getting pressure from outside areas. You've got to play more. If you're going to want to be seen in college, you have to go to for college. You've got to go play in these tournaments and this and this. And there's a little bit of truth to that. But with that said, like if I had to do it all over again, I would highly recommend soccer players to go out for tennis in the spring.
Yeah.
Because the quick footwork, the side to side, the up, the north south running, the east west, the reaction, and again, I notice for example with tennis, there's such a mentality needed where you're losing, you can't blame it on anyone. All of a sudden you have 3 bad shots in a row, and it's like, you just missed 3 3-foot putts in a row on the golf course. And now the next putt's up and you got to put that behind you. And the only putt that matters is the next one, and it's tennis is a great sport to build mental strength. It really is. Not to mention, I think there's a tremendous amount of assimilation to the athleticism for a sport like soccer.
Well, I want to get into tennis because I do have some questions on you on tennis. But
right.
but I'm going to stay on soccer for a little bit longer. When you look at the idea of recruiting, because you just talked about like these players wanting to be seen, they want to get recruited. What was the recruiting? What was that like? How has it evolved? I've had different coaches on. I had, Steve Moffitt has been on, and he's talked about how most of the kids now are texting and that he's had to adapt to that. And I think, but what was the season like? What was the difference between, recruiting for D3 where, there's no scholarships? So like kind of, how do you speak or how did you kind of go about that aspect?
Well, first of all, in order to be, it's very interesting with soccer specifically, okay? And I'll give you an example. Unless it's changed in the last couple years, all right? Men's soccer by the NCAA rules is allowed if they are fully funded, okay? Now, what that means is men's soccer is allowed up to 10.5 full scholarships. Okay, that's
D1?
D1.
Okay.
That's not even enough to fill 11 players.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now that's if their school chooses to be fully funded. Okay, so for most colleges, the big money sports are football and basketball, of course.
Mm-hmm.
All right, but for soccer, let's say for example, we have 10.5.
Chris, no, you just move it over.
Yep.
There you go. Yeah.
Let's say we have 10.5 full rides. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's how we're going to do it. For my 5 most important players, I'm going to give a full ride. Center forward, center midfielders, center back, center defender, and my goalie, for example. Mm-hmm. Okay. So now I've just used 5. I need 24 players on my team. And so for the next, 19 players, I've got 5.5 scholarships left. So here's what I'll do. I'll give you an 1/8 of a ride. I'll give you a quarter. I'll give this guy a half. I'll give this guy a 16th. Or I'll make a deal with you. All right, first year you're paying your own. Well, if you prove your worth we'll renegotiate afterwards. And see, athletic scholarships are 1-year commitments, so they're not a guaranteed 4 years.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
All
they're
right.
1-year commitments. So what I'm getting at is, and pick a college. Let's say Iona. All right, for a full pay at Iona, I'm guessing it's probably 40,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
Minimum. Okay. Well, if they're getting an eighth of a scholarship, and they're paying 35,000, and they can come to Plattsburgh for 15,000. If you see where I'm going with
absolutely.
that. So a lot of times it came down to bottom line dollars and cents. But the one fallacy that was always there, some kids wanted to play Division I because that was their goal, and there's nothing wrong with that. And some people were led to believe by recruiters, things like that, there's a lot of people that think scholarships are like this deck of cards that we can just deal them out left and right. Mm-hmm. And the honest truth of the matter is they're not. So for example, if I can use this 10.5 example, and again, this is best case scenario. This means that your school has chosen to have the maximum allowed. They don't have to do that. They could have 5, 4, 3, whatever they want. So let's say they do. So let's say all your money is tied up in this year's team, and you graduate 4 kids, okay? And those 4 kids, one was a full ride, one was a half, one was a quarter, and let's say the other one was a half. So you got 2 1/4 scholarships to recruit with. That's all you have to give out this year.
Yeah.
So it's not 10.5 every year. You got 10.5 to use amongst your whole entire team. Okay. Now every sport has a different allocation. So football, I think they're up around 60 scholarships. Okay. Because obviously they're bigger teams. Yeah. And different sports have different maxes. But again, that's what the max is. But the university, whichever that is, it's up to them to choose whether to give that money or not. Okay. So what I'm getting at is our goal was to go after Division I players only, because even if they wanted to go Division I, sometimes it didn't make financial sense to them to go to that place and pay $50,000 a year to play on a Division I program. There's a lot of families couldn't afford that, So that was, but that is the challenge, is to, and that was the other thing that we tried to do, but it was not easy, and it was, but probably every second or third year we'd get a Division I on our schedule, and if we had a favorable result, I guarantee you our recruits knew about it, and we wanted them to know about it. And so it was a challenge, to say the least. You have to realize that, if we identified a person that was a major impact player for us, and we thought this guy was going to be a great recruit, what are the odds nobody else knew about him?
Yeah.
And it's and I always use the example of, if there's a really, really great job open, what are the odds that there's only one applicant? You're going to get a lot of applicants for it, and you're going to get a lot of resumes. And so from a recruiting standpoint, almost the way you would look at a job, if this is the greatest job, when you get to that interview, you gotta tell that company why you're the right choice for them, and sell them on yourself. And with that said, from a recruiting standpoint, we got to figure out a way that we can show this recruit why academically, athletically, and socially, this is a great place for them to call their home for 4 years. And that was a challenge.
How many teams were in Division II? Or is it, because I always like Division II, when you think of most sports, it's kind of like that weird middle.
Division, I don't know how many there are now, but there's fewer Division II schools than both 1 and 3. 3 has the most schools. Division 3's up around 450, for almost 500 schools in it. Division 1's a lot less. And Division 2.
And sorry, Chris, what was Division 3?
I believe Division 3 was up around almost 500.
Okay, because Division 2 is 214. So did you find that Division 2 really came into play at all?
It does. It does.
Yeah.
And again, the oddity is the NCAA rules for Division 1 is different than Division 2 are different than Division 3. So sometimes you are battling other things, in order to get that person to look at your university.
I was going to say, I'm looking at Division 2, and there's not a whole lot that I've even heard of.
Yeah, it's
very limited.
Yeah.
Huh. So what about, you talked about before having a connection or a network of people. So when you talk about recruiting, like you can't be everywhere at all times, and you had kids and you have, assistant coaches help out, but did you just rely on a lot of people with networks to say, hey, either alumni or just people you'd met in passing throughout the years that would kind of keep eyes out for people?
Yeah.
Or is that difficult?
No, you do. It's just like, and I'm sure, let's use the real estate business, for example. You get to the point where, you have repeat customers and, things like that, and you get a good name and things like that.
Yep.
It's almost the same when it comes to, recruiting in soccer, where if a high school coach who has a player and sends them to you, and that's they're thinking this is they've got a emotional bond to that kid, and now he's coming to your place, and if he has a great experience, that coach is going to know it, and that coach is going to remember it. But if everything I told that kid turns out to be a stretch of the truth or a downright lie, and the kid has a terrible experience, that coach is going to know it also. Mm-hmm. And high school coaches and club coaches, they'll very quickly figure out who are the people that are maybe stretching the truth a little bit, if it's a very polite way to put it. Mm-hmm. And so, but it's really important, that. But here's a really sort of a funny way to look at it. You're looking at a kid, and if that kid is everything you want in a player, but it's still a bad fit, in other words, he's never been away from home. He's got some issues back home that, that are, you feel, the kid's struggling with some things back home. We don't have his major. These are all red flags. Mm-hmm. And again, we're looking for a kid that's a great fit for us, but it is just as important that we're a good fit for him too. Because if it's a great fit for him and us, now you got something.
How far out did you go for recruiting?
I generally went all in New York State, Vermont. I got really, really lucky with some incredibly good connections in the Ontario, Canada area, all the Toronto area. So we were very fortunate with some really outstanding players from Canada. But I generally didn't go much. Again, it's a SUNY school, so it's actually, that was always the big challenge for us. Think about it geographically. We're an in-state tuition school, okay? An hour and a half in any direction, west and south, are the Adirondacks, and not a very large population base. Mm-hmm. You got to get to almost Albany before you get to a city. We can see another state across the pond, and 20 minutes north of us is another country. So basically, 95% of the population is 2.5 hours away or further. And when you look at a lot of the student population, if you drew a 2-hour circle around a university, the vast majority of a SUNY school get their population from that 2-hour circle. So we always felt that we had to outwork people because, we started developing good contacts in Long Island and Poughkeepsie and Westchester County and New York City and then out to Binghamton and Orange County but again, think about this. If you're Plattsburgh and you want to go recruit a kid in wherever, you're getting a hotel room or you're coming back at 2 a.m. Okay. Like for example, and I'm just using this, like if you're a college in the central part of the state, let's say for example, in an hour and a half you're in Syracuse, in an hour you're in Albany, in an hour and a half you're in Westchester County, in an hour and a half. You see where I'm going with
like
that?
a Utica or something like
that. Yeah. And so there. With that said, we always found that if we could get a kid to visit, all of a sudden things got really good for us because, I honestly mean this in the best of ways. There's a reason why, I made this place my home for, it's 40 years now, which is unbelievable.
Where are you from, Chris?
Well, my parents were in the Navy.
Okay.
And so when my dad retired, he retired when I was in 8th grade, just finishing up 8th grade, and we moved to Albany, New York, Colony, New York.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So I finished high school there and then ended up going to college. But up until then, I was actually born in Londonderry, Northern Ireland. And I lived 3 years in Naples, Italy. I lived in Thurso, Scotland, and so I was all over the world.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So when you have a kid, I should say, like when you're recruiting a kid and you kind of get them on the hook and they get up here, like what's the process? Like you get them here, they see a game, they spend some time with the team. Like you said, when you get them up here, it's a little easier to hook them because of, and again, I lived through my whole life and I love it here, and, is it a hard sell for some kids? Do they find that it's like the trip through the mountains is like, where the hell am I going?
Yeah.
A little, or a mixture? Yeah.
Well, and again, it's, there's no perfect science. And I think a lot of good recruiting is understanding the young man and what they're interested in. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so, for example, if the kid likes to hike, he likes the outdoors, whatever the case may be, I think it's important to point those things out. Like I used to take him up to the top of Kehoe building. Mm-hmm. Okay. And you look on one side, you point out, Mount Snow, you see Jay Peaks over in the left corner, because I'm telling him this because I know he's a skier. You point out all the things across the lake. If they're an environmental science major, you talk about all the things they do in Lake Champlain and in the Adirondacks and the ponds and the rivers and then you turn around, go look out the other window, and you can see Whiteface. And stuff like that. And you talk about, the beauty of this place is, you've got a bustling little city in Plattsburgh. Mm-hmm. All right, you got everything you want. We've got our malls and everything else. But, in an hour, you can be in a major city in Montreal. You got the mountains on one side. You got the mountains on the other side. And so there's so much to offer here. And honestly, that's what I love. Probably some of our biggest battles, and I'm just laughing when I think this, is I remember having 2 kids come up to an open house on May 1st, and they were late because of all the snow coming down, and it's like you can't even you can't make that stuff up, yeah. And so. What are you going to do? You can't worry about what you can't control.
What percentage of the kids that come up do you feel make decisions based off of, because the reason I say this, they're coming in at 18 years old. They don't probably, most of them don't know what the hell they want to do. How many are coming up purely for soccer, or is there a lot that come up and like, well, I picked here. I could play anywhere, but they have my major or the mountains or whatever. Was there a percentage where you're like, we know like these kids are here just for soccer,
Right.
and then these are here for?
Yeah, well, I think, and obviously I don't have any definitive data on this, but I think there are those young men that make decisions based upon, the shiniest object, if that's a good way to put it. I've had people make decisions that were so incredibly well thought out. It had my major. It had here. Like what I used to try to do was I would also, if, for example, if that student was interested in, only because we just mentioned it, let's say environmental science, I would also have a couple of our past players who are environmental science majors ring them up and talk to them about everything they're doing. Here's what the school did for me and everything else, and show, here's somebody that's just a couple years older than you, and here's everything they're doing, and then I would talk to them about here's the soccer aspect, okay, but one of the things I used to always say is if soccer ended for you today, and you couldn't play soccer, would you still come here? Okay.
Yeah, great question.
And and that's an important thing to identify. Does it still meet all your other needs? Because ultimately, if we don't have but now in the same breath, I did try to recruit kids that didn't know what they wanted. And the reason for that is we had the largest major at the time at Plattsburgh State for an incoming freshman was undeclared. So because we were such a liberal arts school with so many different majors, you could come here, take your gen ed requirements as a freshman, dabble in some different things, talk to some friends, and hopefully within a year or so, you figure out what you wanted to do. And once you did that, there was a really good chance that we had that major for you. And that's in a perfect world, it works out that way. There are, as you had alluded to, there are those kids that have the attitude that I want to play soccer, and if it means I get an education while I'm doing it, awesome.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I always liked is the NCAA rules were, I'd say, reasonably lenient. Okay, with being eligible, okay? But the university's rules at Plattsburgh were a little tougher than the NCAA rules. And the reason being is the NCAA said all you have to do is have in your freshman year, you had to just pass, like all you had to do was be in good academic standing, okay? And then after 1 year, have 24 credits passed. Okay,
Yeah,
that's all you had to.
Yeah.
But now, if you think about this, if you pass 12 credits every year, okay, you're barely going to graduate in 5 years, if you're lucky.
I was going to say, because when I went, I think 15 was minimum for...
Exactly.
Yeah.
So 99% of all the majors are 120 credits to graduate, which averages out to 8 semesters at 15 credits a semester.
Yep.
Okay. Well, if you drop to 12, you're now 3 behind. If and some kids would drop even more. But the key to that whole thing is if you were in good academic standing, meaning your GPA, you could be eligible for the NCAA, but yet, like a good example would be a student could, at the end of 2 years of college, have passed 48 credits, 12 credits a semester, be 100% eligible, and academically in good standing grade-wise. And you're still 3.5 years away from graduation. All right, because you're taking all electives and gen ed requirements, and you're not taking any of the majors within your major, or classes within your major, excuse me. And so the college actually made this rule that at the end of 3 years, all right, you had to have they would put these percentages in towards graduation within your major. So it wasn't just credits. So, for example, like we've all seen the major that maybe you got to take Bio 101, then Bio 102, and then let's say kinesiology and like sequential courses. Well, if you haven't taken any of those classes, you know, each one of those is a sequence. You know, that kid will never graduate. And so what the college found out is that they would put these limitations on, or actually not limitations, but and they were like everybody knew them, so we could help the student to be on track to graduate. So even if they didn't graduate, like a very unique statistic that people don't realize is like nationwide, only like 35% of all students graduate in 4 years. As odd as that sounds. Yeah. Okay. Now,
could some of those be less too? Or is that all
no,
considering?
No, that means a minimum of 4.
Okay.
So what I'm getting at is like a lot of people take a little extra time for good reasons. You know, they might be getting a minor, or maybe they're a double major, or things like that. But with that said, the vast majority, you know, some might be doing an internship. You know, that it takes an extra semester or whatever. But a lot of people just fall behind, okay? And so all we were trying to do was help the student athlete stay on track so that even at the point that after their 4th season of eligibility and their athletics is done, they're so close and they can see the light at the end of the tunnel that they'll finish that next semester and get their degree, as compared to the kid that his athletics are done and they're still 2.5 years away from graduation.
Yeah, see ya.
They just walk away.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, and so that was part of it, was to be able to help them and guide them so that, you know, and again, I used to always make the kids laugh, and I swear I must have said it 10. What I need from you is I need you to graduate. I need you to make your first million, then I need you to think about me. All right, and you know, keep me in your mind.
Yeah, we need that alumni check coming in.
Yeah, there you go.
Is there any? Do you have a number one recruit? Like, was there someone that you recruited that you were pumped to get that was like a big deal to you?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Is there one that sticks out above everybody else?
I think there's a lot. There's quite a few.
Hierarchy up there?
Yeah, and absolutely. There was.
I mean, when something like when you let's say you land a whale for Division III soccer. I mean, are these guys that came from potentially a D1 school that transferred down, or say transferred down, but decided to go D3 instead, or
yeah, and,
or maybe you were in competition for this one guy, and they're like,
yeah,
somehow we decided to come here.
Oh yeah, and we've had D1 transfers, and we've had kids that. You know, and we've also lost, you know, the beauty of going after a D1 kid is if you lost them to a D1 program, well, at least you didn't have to play against them. You know,
True, yeah.
You just never wanted to lose a stud to your competitors.
And that happened often? Was there a lot of transfer within SUNYACs?
No.
Yeah.
But within SUNYACs, no. But we would see. I was very fortunate where. I tried really hard. Like I always had, I actually had compiled, it was almost 3 pages long, of past assistant coaches and past players who are now in coaching, either at college, high school,
I read it.
Or
it's
club.
A pretty extensive list. It's almost like 70 people or something.
It's
probably more now.
Yeah, it's quite a bit. And that 70 was just in college. And so, but the beauty of all that is it really helped your networking. And that, to me, that helped a lot. But see, the other thing too is most people, they don't get into coaching if they don't have a passion for that sport. And that was probably one of the things I was most proud of, was we were either finding kids with that passion, or somewhere along the way they developed that passion and wanted to stay in it. And that's the part that I loved most about my profession, was I had this passion as a kid, and I think long after I was done playing, I think I was still that kid. And I was able to, I guess you could say, keep that passion going, and get to call that work, you know. And I used to always, I used to tell all the guys I was trying to steer towards getting into coaching was, I haven't worked in 20 years. This is highway robbery. I'm getting paid for this. I can't believe this. And so I was always proud to get the kids involved with it.
Well, I was gonna say it leaves definitely leaves a legacy, and I think because I was able to go back after playing and coach at kind of at the high school, junior high level, and it's just fun being on the other side. You see the game differently. You're forced to see the game. I mean, I wasn't, I luckily learned from, I coached under Rob, so like for me, taking what I could learn from him and then kind of apply it to the lower levels and have an understanding. For me, it was good. I was never going to go on and coach above that, but it was fun just to see it from a different angle.
Absolutely.
And, and I think I said there's a level of being able to teach and give back and kind of see. And some of those kids, I mean, I'm sure have an opportunity to coach at some point. I know the other guy, I guess the men's soccer, Kyle, who's at Clinton now, with Shazy, but I don't remember I think I coached him. I don't know how old he is now, but they all kind of merged together. But like I said, I think there's kids I've coached that are now coaching in some capacity, which is cool to see. Like it's kind of like a long lineage. Let me see. Just got a lot of. I'm just trying to think of just which ones are the best ones to ask you here. But was there ever a moment when you got into coaching, like you said, obviously you got in young? Was there ever a point that you remember where you felt like you had it? Like you felt like I can do this, or you felt kind of had you gotten over kind of the bumps and were like, okay, I'm established and I feel confident in my abilities? Did you ever hit a point like that?
See, you know what the hard part is? It's so hard not to gauge failure and success without talking about wins and losses, because ultimately that's what everybody will judge us on anyway. But I think, I don't know why I remember this. It's funny you bring that up. But the first 4 years at Plattsburgh, I remember specifically, I believe it was 7-9-2, or excuse me, first year was 5.
I'm looking at your stats up
5-9-1.
here.
Okay.
Let me see. We got it. What, 85 first year? There we go.
So it was 5-9-2, then 7-9-2, then 7-9-2, and then finally we got a winning record at 8-7-3, and then the next year we took a nice jump and went to 12-6-1, and that was a huge. And then the year after that.
90,
we went, and again, but if you listen to the slow but sure progress, 5-9-2, 7-9-2, 7-9-2, 8-7-3, 12-6-1, and then bang, 16-2-2, and we had
say 850 winning percentage.
Yeah, that was fun, and that was a good. It just and then. And then once you started achieving those levels, now you could start attracting recruits, and we showed, look, here's where we were, here's where we're going to, and but that is one of the things that we, like I've met with a lot of friends who had a son or daughter who was looking at a college, and they would ask me, what do you think we should ask and talk to the coach about? And I always said, there's nothing worse. And again, I would look at it as a job interview. You're interviewing for a job and you just answer yes and no questions. You're not selling yourself, and so, but I would also take it a step further. And I think a great question for a recruit is to say, hey, coach, haven't seen me play. How do you think I fit into the program? And put
challenge you a little bit.
Yeah, well, challenge the coach to say, here's what your strengths are. Here's what and again, if a coach is I think it's important to for a coach to say, listen, right now we've got the top goalkeeper in the conference who's a senior coming up. And we really like you as a goalkeeper. What we're hoping is that you're going to practice next to this guy. He's a great leader. And then you're going to inherit that role. And, and that might be, and that's a fabricated story I'm giving you, but I think it's very fair for a kid to ask that to the coach, and the coach needs to be able to say, honestly, I've never seen you play, or honestly, well, you're quick. You do this, and this well. We graduated 2 kids on the wing that were real quick for us. That's a hole in us. No guarantees, but here's where we're hoping that you can excel on. And you can talk about that. Mm-hmm. But I think it's important for a kid to find out, is this a good fit for me? And there's nothing wrong with, and again, a kid needs to understand, if you ask a tough question, you may or may not like the answer you get. Mm-hmm. It's always awkward for me if a kid asks me that and I say, I got to be honest with you. We've got 24 returning players on next year's team. I'm not sure you can make our team. Mm-hmm. I'll give you every opportunity to make the team, but no promises. And they may not like that answer, but I have to be honest.
Yeah.
I can't, I can't BS them.
Especially when they're potentially uprooting their life.
That's right. That's right.
Now regarding, I say comfortable coaching, but like challenges, is there anything that really sticks out to you over the years? Because obviously starting out slow and kind of building up, but was there anything that really jumped out of like this was a big challenge, or this was like a continuous, almost like a little nag that always was a challenge throughout the years?
I think if anything, the recruiting wears on you a little bit. Mm-hmm. Because, it's never ending. It's if you're happy with this year's incoming class, then you better get started on next year. And then it goes a step further. We need to identify the best sophomores in the state so that as juniors we can get them thinking about us. It just never ends. And if you sleep on it, somebody else is outworking you. And you really need with the recruiting is a blue collar mentality. And that's a challenge that never stopped for me. Mm-hmm. The other things that are real tough is, we've all heard the expression, we need to treat all our players equally. And you may laugh at me, but I totally disagree with that. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I'll just give you a couple examples. We had certain team rules. Okay. And anybody out there who has gone away to college, and at the end of that first semester, when you're going home, and if it's the second week in December and you're going home, and one of our players, his mom calls him up on December 18th and says, hey, we don't want you to come home for Christmas. Kid lived way out in Long Island because we're having guests over and we don't have enough room in the house. And the kid was distraught, made a couple bad decisions downtown. All right.
Wow.
And I remember our AD at the time came to me and said, what are you going to do about this kid? He did this, and this. And are you going to kick him off the team? And I said, absolutely not. And I said, he needs us. Yeah. This is all he's got. And I said, trust me, I'm gonna make him pay, but I'm not going to give up on him. And it's little stories like that you hope you can be a positive influence mm-hmm. on a kid. This could be the worst story ever. I had a player who was as normal could be, and he got subpoenaed to testify on attempted murder of his father trying to kill his mother.
Ooh.
And we're asking this kid to be a normal human being while he's up here in Plattsburgh. That's, and what I'm getting at is the challenges. Not every kid that ever came here had the perfect family and the perfect support, and the challenges to help kids, have a great experience, but go on to be positive young men and women in their community. Some of them started out because of their home circumstances with 2 strikes against them right off the bat.
Yeah.
And to, 1, to understand that, and 2, to try to help them through it, and 2, to show them, and that's what our team was supposed to be, was their extended family. And, when they felt that, I think that became very successful.
It's like everything else. Like if you there's the level of you treat everybody with the same level of respect, and then there's the level of, as with athletes, some kids can take things different, like you said, backgrounds.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of reading people and having like that emotional intelligence of, hey, this kid can take a little more pressing. This kid, I got to be a little softer because of his reactions.
Yep.
But yeah, 100%. I think you're as a coach or as a leader in a sport, which for you, you're talking 20-something guys on a team, 20-something different personalities, backgrounds, and mannerisms, mental states of whether they're just going to, go off the rails if you give them a critique. And some guys feed off that. They want to be a perfectionist. And I think finding that balance and orchestrating, like I said, you are orchestrating like an ensemble of instruments, and like you got to make sure everybody's, the defenders and the midfield and the goalies, like everybody's got to be in tune. It's there's a lot to it. It's not just like, hey, roll ball out there and go play. It's like you're dealing with a lot of off the field stuff that we all deal with.
Yeah.
And trying to keep it, I don't know how you do it to keep it off the field type thing, but it's hard because one person lives with them.
It is, and, and it's just the ability to know your team well enough that certain guys, just as you said, and I used to, I never minded really getting on one of your top players or a team leader in front of the rest of the team, because it showed that, man, if I'm going to get on that guy, I'll get on anybody, in that sense. And with that, sometimes you got to know, certain kids, just as you said, you have to talk to them differently, and if any of us have had multiple children, you know that they're not all the same. Yeah, they aren't.
Well, one thing that I've noticed, and again, besides watching games from the sideline, I've seen, whether this is, different things around alumni weekend and stuff. I'm usually dragged as Gina's +1, and but when I go, I see the way a lot of the old players that come back, how they interact with you. A lot of them, you get some players that come back and like, hey, coach, and they chat with you and they kind of go off and do their own thing. I've seen a couple times where you basically are just like holding court and all these kids are around you just chatting. And part of it is when you got these young guys that are now, probably in their 20s at some point or have their own families or even just still, young and playing in some capacity, to come back and want to come back and make the trip back for an alumni. And then also they want to talk to you and they still want to, and I see you kind of busting on them and joking around and, they give it right back to you. And I think, building that up, because it's tough when sometimes kids leave and like, I just, I'm good. Like he coached me, but that's it. And was that ever a goal of yours, an aim of yours, that just happened naturally just based on how you interacted? Because I do find that the kids that come back, they seem like they have a strong bond to you still. And some of these kids you may not have seen in a couple of years.
Yeah, no, it's, there's no exact science. It's some of the kids that you had this extraordinarily strong bond, they move to another state and they never come back. And you touch, you communicate once in a while via text or phone call, things like that. And I love it when any of the past players get in touch with me and things like that. And it's a lot of fun reminiscing and stuff like that. And so there's a lot of that, but in the same breath, there's always that guy that put everything out there and gave you 4 fantastic years and walked away and never played again, and I always found that interesting. And then you've got a couple guys that, they're 65 years old and they're still coming back to alumni games.
Yeah.
And they just
Still
love
strapped,
it. Yeah,
putting the boots on and going out.
Yeah. And then, and then the day after they can hardly move, and, but that's okay.
So, and then talking briefly, actually one I promise two more coaching things for Plattsburgh State, and then I want to jump into very briefly in Clinton, and then I want to talk tennis with you for a sec. So,
Sure.
Did you ever have 3 things, and you kind of rapid fire if you want? During the season, did you have anything that allowed you to decompress, relax, to kind of get over anxiety and stress? Obviously, it's a competitive season. There's, a lot of coaches live and die. I say live and die, but they put a lot into what they do, and results matter.
Yeah.
Did you have anything that allowed you to kind of have some escape during the season? And I didn't really get into this, but obviously you live with the women's coach, so Karen's dealing with her own thing, and was there opportunities for you guys to just kind of decompress during the season, or was it like, hey, we're sprinting, getting through it, and then we'll hang out in December and just kind of relax?
I will say this, that again, if knowing the way the SUNYAC weekends were, you had a game on Friday and a game on Saturday.
And typically opposite schedules.
Correct.
Yeah.
So if I was away on Friday, Saturday, Karen would be home on Friday, Saturday, and vice versa. All right. So in the most perfect of all worlds, we go 4-0 on the weekend, and we have a fantastic weekend.
Yeah.
All right. But you do have to realize that if one of us went 2-0 and one of us went 0-2, we all went 0-2.
Yeah.
All right? And but what really you're saying is, what was the escape? That when you have a tough weekend and you come home, and the first person that hugs you is your 3-year-old boy, or your 5-year-old girl, you suddenly realize, this 1-0 double overtime loss, is not as important anymore. And, that, I think having children was what forced you that no matter what happened, you had to put it behind, because when you came home, you were dad.
Is Bailey older or Ryan?
Bailey's older.
When was she born?
She was 94 and Ryan was 97.
Because just kind of looking at, when you look at and I don't know if there's a correlation, but it's kind of funny, when you started having success was around the time, a little bit prior to kids. But again, when you look at the numbers, I mean, I got young kids, and it becomes a challenge, especially when one of the spouses is always gone. So then you're solo parent with coaching. You had some great records, and I just, speaking from my experience, I remember having our first kid, and I just kind of like kicked my ass in gear of like, you got to step up in other parts of your life, and you cut out certain things. And as you get another kid, you go more extreme and more extreme. But did you find that was something that allowed you to really go all in on coaching and be able to kind of, again, have that line in the sand, now dad, the best you could, but it allowed you to kind of prioritize better? I
think what it did too was it forced you to be more intelligently efficient in your free time.
Yeah.
Because when the kids went down for a nap, that wasn't the time to relax. You had to get stuff done.
Yeah.
All right. And
prime time.
Yeah. And so I think between, that's where I will always say the best thing that ever happened to us having virtually the exact opposite schedules as a husband and wife was you had this extraordinary appreciation for the single parent.
Yeah.
Because for almost every other weekend, you were the single parent. And, and again, think about this, if our game starts Friday at 4, all right, I'm at the field by 1:30. Okay. I don't get home, best case scenario, till 7. Well, what are my 2 kids doing? You're juggling all that. And then on Saturday, you got a game at 1, and I'm there at 10:30. Best case scenario, I get home at 3:30. And meanwhile, you're trying to give your kids opportunities in their extracurricular activities and get them here and get them there and everything else. And quite honestly, we had a lot of help. We had good fortune of having great grandparents that helped a lot, and friends, and and the first thing you do is figure out who's on your team or your kids' team.
Yep.
And carpooling is God. But it was a struggle for sure. But I think it made you better. When your kids hug you when you come home and you're distraught, it puts a smile on your face.
Yeah. No, 100%.
Yeah.
Well, I guess last question around, I guess, kind of mindset stuff. Did you, any regrets that you had coaching? Anything that really sticks out? Or is it just, I guess I'd leave it at that.
As weird as this sounds, in my very first year, I kicked a kid off the team. And most people would have probably agreed that was the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. And as embarrassing as this sounds, but that was the only kid I ever kicked off the team. Now, I might have made their life a little miserable and made them pay for what they did, but I always, in my mind, I wish I could go back and instead of kicking the kid off the team, that was the easy choice because I don't have to deal with him anymore. All right. Mm-hmm. He made mistakes. He was a thorn in our side. Just get rid of him. We're better off without him. With that said, I still think I failed on that kid. I should have figured out a way to make him, to turn him around. Mm-hmm. And so if I could go back in time, I'd love to do that different. I'd love to go back and see if we could get him to, just be a better citizen.
Yeah. Now regarding the new coaching endeavor coming back, I guess out of retirement for the Clinton Community Girls Soccer Program, which hasn't been around, you said, in 3 years?
Yes.
4 years?
Yeah, 3.
Were you just itching to get back into coaching, or?
Well,
I saw it, and first off, I was like, well, that's a great person to recruit for coaching. But then I also was, knowing that you guys are, kind of moving on to some fun stuff in your own life, personal lives. Like, what was the reason you came back or are coming back?
Well, I spoke with Kevin, the athletic director, and I've always had a very high appreciation for him. And, I think he does a good job. He was a very good basketball coach in his day. Mm-hmm. And we talked about it. And the bottom line is, I just thought it was really good. It would be something good for our community, it needs a little help for sure because, it's that the challenges are there in the sense of, if you think about any high school team, any college team, every team loses players to attrition, to graduation, whatever the case may be. But there's no returning players. Mm-hmm. So we're starting from scratch. So that's the challenge is to get a little buzz about Clinton Community College women's soccer. And I think it would be a great thing for the community. It's certainly a challenge for me. The challenge is too, I wasn't on board until well after all the seasons are done. So I hadn't an opportunity to do any recruiting in the fall and or see any players play. Mm-hmm. And so there's some challenges just purely on logistics. So honestly, what we're looking for in a perfect world, they're an outstanding soccer player and want to come to Clinton and further their education. With that said, athletes that have played other sports that want a challenge, right now we just need the numbers to get it off the ground. And, a year or two down the road, we can be a little more selective. But, the benefits, I don't think a lot of people realize the benefits of being a part of a team at a college. I look at so many past players, and I look at their acquaintances, their connections in the job world, many of those come from their past teammates. All right. If you come to Clinton and you get on the women's soccer team, you're going to be around 15, 18 other people from different worlds. And you're going to make friends. And that's the beauty of starting at a new place, at a college. If before the school year even starts, you've got 15 new friends, what a fantastic way to get off to a good start. Both socially and then academically, it's going to help because as a coach, I'm going to be able to help look after you academically. And then specifically for Clinton, which is such a huge positive for the student athletes, is if any of them want to go on to a four-year school, we've got so many connections in so many other four-year schools that we're going to be able to not write them a recommendation, but to call up and specifically talk to a specific person to help them get either continue their athletic career or just get into a four-year school that they want to go to. Those type of things, I think we can help, especially the local student athlete, and that was really the end-all goal.
Yeah, I think it's good that they're doing. I know there's a couple other sports they're getting back.
Yeah.
And again, I remember as a kid, like Clinton always had sports, and Clinton always had pretty good sports. I mean, the girls obviously won a national championship 15 years ago now. But when you look at I just think it's nice to have the option for people to play, especially local. There's a lot of local kids that go there. Now, a few other questions, and we'll kind of wrap it up after these. First off, I want to start most memorable moment that you can think of in soccer out of all the. I mean, the one that sticks out to me. It might be the same. I want to actually answer it first. I'm thinking it's probably the same. Like at least from a season perspective.
From a season perspective,
or it could be. I mean, it could be a game, but I was thinking of obviously 05, but.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. In 2005, we went to the Final Four, and it was, there wasn't a lot that could possibly go wrong that season. And it was such a good. This is so flies under the radar was the fact that. We had All-Americans. We won the conference. We won the regional. We went to the Final Four. But the thing that I remember the most was it was such a great group of people. It was like I can tell you, virtually, probably 4/5 of them. I can tell you exactly right now what they're doing, where they live. What they're doing in their lives, and it was just such a good group of kids. And they were kids, and then they became men, and it was really special that way. And for them to have been rewarded with their commitment, their character, all those descriptive terms that we use with great athletes. It was so nice to see all that get rewarded because they deserved it, and I remember talking to them after in the locker room after we just lost and their season was over, and I remember telling them thank you for just taking me on the ride,
I mean, that's arguably got to be. I mean, that's by far statistically your best season.
Yeah,
But I think, and I just remember that vivid. I mean, I was in high school at the time, and I just remember, like, I mean, you know how it is. Like sports, there's a buzz in sports. Like the season starts, and you kind of just find your footing, and then like as the season goes along, you know who the players are, and you know, or I mean, like the teams, and and you could just see like, well, I mean, I'm looking at it now, it's 22-2, but like. They just win. They win, and like they had a special team. And then when you started to go deeper into the, you win the SUNYACs, and now you're playing. You hosted right early on the NCAA's.
Yeah, we hosted. Let's see, we hosted the first and second round, and then we hosted the quarterfinal as well.
Did you win one of those games on a shootout? Or am I thinking of a different?
No.
Okay.
That was a different year.
Because there was a different year. There was a bigger game that I think I remember watching, and they won on the shootout. But so I just remember the 05 team like going, just kind of kept going, and it was pretty cool. So last two questions. Your daughter coaches now, right?
No, she doesn't.
Oh, she doesn't.
She just resigned. She got the president met with her at Paul Smith College, and she went from being the women's soccer coach to being promoted to director of admissions.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I was going to ask, because I knew that she had coached, and then kind of coming from two parents that coached for, decades.
Yeah.
Was that like a natural thing, or was that something that she just kind of took on her own and ran with it?
It's funny. She always worked our soccer camps.
Okay.
And she was just great. She was the one that you always wanted to babysit your kids when she was a teenager. She was just so good with the kids.
Yeah.
And she was just a natural at soccer camp, and she started working for us when she was young, and she went to college, and she was in a fitness and wellness major. And then from there, she did the travel Europe kind of thing, and she went to some exotic places, and ended up coming back, and she was the soccer coach at Paul Smith's, but it was a part-time thing, and then a position opened up as a GA for the women's soccer team at Cortland. She needed her master's, so she went and got that. And then Paul Smith called her and said, if we had a full-time position, would you come back? And she said, yeah. And we loved it because she was closer to home and everything else. And so I'm not sure, I almost laugh when I say this, but I think whatever I would have told her to do, she might have done the opposite, like the puddle example you gave. Yeah. So, but I don't know. There's so many positives with being a coach, working with people, being outside. I've always tried to get elementary and secondary education people to get your coaching certificate, because it's a nice breath of fresh air, getting out of the classroom and doing all those kind of things. And so obviously I'm very passionate about it, and I can't speak highly enough of it, but I got to be honest with you, I wasn't upset that she got into coaching, that's for sure.
I just thought it was kind of cool, and anytime you think like generational, you think especially if it kind of wears up. I mean, then you go to like pro sports, you see like Tiger Woods' kid, or LeBron's kids, and and they kind of follow in the footsteps of the parents. And then again, last question is tennis. How did the tennis season go for you? Because I know that's kind of your outlet now, right?
Yeah. Well, I didn't coach this past year.
So it's just playing?
Yeah, I was just playing. So we're snowbirds down in Florida. So we go down there, and actually it was hilarious. I joined this court club. There was a tennis team, a travel tennis team. Mm-hmm. All right. And at my age, I had 2 weeks of tryouts to make the team. And we have 17 guys on our team and only 8 play in a match. We have 3 practices a week, and I'm like a kid again.
This is like, this is like high school, college tennis.
So
you got to make the starting lineup.
You got to make the starting lineup, and so for me, it's fun. It's a nice outlet, and I've actually really enjoyed. I coached 1 year at Beekmantown, the boys tennis team, and I actually coached 1 year at Plattsburgh State, the women's tennis team, and. So I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed working with the players it's so much more on a one-on-one basis. There's repetition, but again, I really found with tennis the psychology of making the athlete stronger. And in fact, that's one of the reasons why when I was at Beekmantown, I think we had 4 soccer players playing tennis. And I wanted them playing tennis because I truly believe it made him a better soccer player.
Yeah, when you describe that, the footwork.
But I thought the mentality, because when you're on the court and everything's going south, and you got to have the mental strength to turn it around and figure out a way, or you can tank, And I liked it. I really liked coaching the tennis quite a bit.
Gina played back in, I think, high school, and she always liked tennis, and she's still a big tennis fan. Like, we watch a lot of tennis, so anytime, especially the majors, and we'll put the Tennis Channel on, and I've gotten more into knowing the players and kind of just watching it, and the more you watch it, there's so much. It's such a simple game because you're hitting a ball back and forth over a net, but then when you break it down, there's so many strategies. There's like you said, composure. Purely just athleticism, but I think tennis is it's in a fun space right now because there's some really good players, but it's very, you're starting to kind of get, I think, to the end of the, Nadal, Federer, Djokovic. Djokovic is still very relevant, but you're starting to see them kind of phase out. So then you have a big wave of young guys.
Sure.
And then on the women's side, Serena's aged out, and you have all these women that are just incredible. So I think there's a lot of depth in tennis right now, at least at the professional ranks, and it's fun to watch, and especially when you get some quality players getting into these finals, and so I don't know, do you watch many or much pro tennis?
I do at times.
Yeah,
honestly, I will say this: whether you're a tennis fan or not, 2 things. One. It's something you can do the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. All right. And so you can do it well after, as you're getting older and everything else. And so it gives you an outlet with a little bit of, physical exercise. But the other thing, if you ever get a chance, and probably the easiest way for anybody listening to this is to go up to Montreal for the Rogers Cup.
Oh, yeah.
And when you go up there, you buy a general admission ticket. And you can just walk around the grounds. And so picture this. You have a center court stadium that holds, 10,000 people. Then you got another stadium that holds like 4,000 people. And then another one that holds like 2,000. And then you got like 6 of them that hold like 600. Mm-hmm. And then you got another 6 or 7 courts that just have these little high school bleachers on. All right. And what you can do is you can walk around the grounds because you have a general admission ticket. Mm-hmm. And you can go watch over in the corner, like it's almost like being at Memorial Hall, where you're just outside the fence and you're watching the number 2 women's tennis player in the world practice.
Yeah.
And it is amazing where their 1 hour practice is like the most unbelievably taxing thing you've ever seen. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting here going, I cannot believe that person just worked that hard in a 1 hour practice, and they've got a match tomorrow. And the person next to me says, no, they got a match in 4 hours. And I'm like, what? And, the greatest thing about going to the Rogers Cup is you'll be able to get really close to the players and have this appreciation for their athletic strength and ability is mind-boggling when you actually see it in person.
Gina's been up there a couple times, and I think it was last year. Her and her friend went down to the U.S. Open,
yep.
and they saw Serena's first match of the, like, she played, I think, 3. And I was watching on TV, and it was so loud. And they actually, they were saying they saw that. I think, like, Medvedev played earlier, and Nadal was practicing, and somehow, I don't know why, they ended up, like, getting in the spot where they shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
And he comes walking off the practice court. They'd
Yeah.
be, like, walking through the door, and they're standing right there.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, and he kind of looked at him, like, confused. I got a photo of literally sitting there, like, shaking her friend's hand. Just this confused look of, like, I should probably know these two girls. It's probably some players' wives because they were so, like, they weren't even where they should be. And but they said the practice was the same thing because they saw Serena practicing, and you see all these players off on this court, and it's not, I mean, they're not volleying the ball. I mean, these are full-on shots. They're running around, hitting all these things. And, you know, when you look at just, and again, you take if you take a 5-set match, I mean, these matches go on 4 hours.
Yeah.
And it's
Absolutely.
It's incredible the stamina they have. And I think that's one of the things that I've had more appreciation for is just watching, like, truly sitting down and just watching this whole thing build of, like, just the ups and the downs. And it's like basketball. You think of how many, like, people go on runs in basketball. Tennis is all about runs.
Yeah.
You know, and then you're learning about break points and learning about just the, you know, the concept of the strategy and who has advantages. It's cool. It's a very fun sport. Yeah. Well, Chris, we're going to wrap it up there. I appreciate you coming on. And again, I probably should have read this at the beginning because you're very humble. And before I actually say that, is it true that you play people left-handed in ping pong just to beat them?
Racquetball.
Racquetball, okay. Yeah. I heard these stories. I just wanted to confirm from the horse's mouth. Just a couple stats from. You had 26 consecutive winning seasons. You were the winningest coach in SUNYAC men's soccer history. I'm hoping these are still true to this day because 8 SUNYAC titles, 11 tournament appearances, national finals in 2005. Overall coaching record, 477 wins, 169 losses, 65 ties. 7 times SUNYAC Coach of the Year, and 15 All-American accolades of players. Jason Souza, who we've mentioned, 3-time All-American. Was he the best player you ever coached?
He was darn good.
Yeah, because I remember him, but again, I was younger. But he was.
Don't ask a parent to pick between their children.
I was going to say. I figured you had you have a Mount Rushmore maybe or a few more, but then a bunch of other awards. So obviously very, and a Hall of Fame inductee. I should have mentioned that too.
Oh, thank you.
These are all true, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I didn't know if you were just giving me some some fluff here to start.
Yeah, no.
But Chris, I appreciate you coming on. And again, hopefully the Clinton program gets some traction, which I think, off to a good start.
Well, thank you so much. We're looking forward to it.
Perfect. Well, that's it. Episode 266 of the Galen Trombley Show. We're out. Thank you for listening to the Galen Trombley Show. Be sure to subscribe, review, and share the episode. You can follow me on all social platforms at Galen Trombley. Thanks for listening.